Welcome to my channel Later Life. My name is Rudolph, and on this channel I talk about my life as a retiree in Finland and about different topics related to early retirement and retiring abroad. In this video, I'm going to talk about working in the Middle East prior to retirement. When I say Middle East, I mean the GCC. The GCC are made up of 6 relatively wealthy Middle Eastern countries, which are Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, and Qatar. The reason I think working in the Middle East is a good idea prior to retirement, especially if you're planning to take early retirement, is that the wages are relatively high and you earn money tax-free. And also the cost of living is not that high relative to the amount you get paid. Personally, I've only worked in Oman, so I can't say with 100% certainty that everything that I say will be exactly the same in all of the GCC countries, but from my experience, they all operate in a fairly similar manner. When you receive a job offer, your remuneration will be broken down into different facets. For example, when I worked in Oman, my remuneration was broken down as basic salary, housing allowance, transportation, utilities, cost of living, and other. When you get paid at the end of the month, you get one amount. You don't get different amounts based on these different subcategories of remuneration. However, if you have a chance, it is always best to have your basic salary be as high as possible. As an expat working in the Middle East, you don't pay salary, which means you don't pay into a social security system, and the company itself does not pay into any sort of social security for you. So you're completely responsible for providing for your own retirement. However, they have a scheme called gratuity. And when you leave the company, you end up getting a lump sum payment based on this gratuity formula. The reason I say that it's really important to get your base salary as high as possible is because it's used in the calculation of your gratuity. Again, as I mentioned previously, my experience is from Oman, but I've also had a lot of experience in the UAE, and the UAE has a similar system. I can't say for sure for Saudi and the others, but I do believe that all of the GCC countries operate on a similar manner. Now, in my case, when I was in Oman, the way gratuity works is that you get 15 days per year for your first 3 years and 30 days per year after you've worked for 3 years. So when I say 15 days, you can basically consider that half a month's salary. And when I say 30 days, you can basically consider that a month's salary. I think in most cases, if you leave employment in less than a year, you actually get nothing. So let me give you an example of how this would work. If you worked for 2 years, you would receive 2 times half a month's salary, meaning you get 1 month salary or basic salary. If you were to work for 5 years, you would receive 5 times 1 month, equaling 5 months basic salary. So if we look at the breakdown of my remuneration, basic salary was 52%, housing allowance was 11%, transportation was 2%, utilities was 2%, cost of living was 1%, and other was 32%. If you ask me, I think all of these percentages are completely arbitrary, and the only thing that the company really cares about is trying to keep the basic salary as low as possible, because that reduces the amount they end up paying in terms of gratuity. While I was there, we never received a bonus, but I believe also probably your bonus would be paid out on just your basic salary. So that's yet another reason why the company would like to try and keep the basic salary as low as possible. While the amounts that we've just talked about for gratuity aren't life-changing amounts, it's really useful for relocating, because usually after you finish working in the Middle East, you end up having to leave and go back to your own country, or maybe you found another country where you want to go. But obviously you have those relocation expenses to consider. Speaking of relocation, when you get an offer to work in the Middle East, there are a few things that you should expect in that offer. One is that you should, at the end of your assignment, usually if you say leave in good standing and you haven't been fired for cause, the company will also fly you to your wherever you're going next, so you don't have to pay for your flight. In addition to that, once a year, you should get a flight back to your home country. So let's say if you're from the US and you're working in UAE, then at the end of your assignment, you should expect that your employer would fly you back to the US. And in addition, while you're there, every year, they should fly you home as well for an annual break. Depending on the company and your relationship with HR, you might be able to negotiate some variation to that. So, for example, if you're from the US, but maybe you don't want to go to the US, maybe you want to go to Brazil for your holiday. In some cases, you can get them to say, fly you to Brazil. Probably they'll want to check the prices, and maybe they'll say, okay, if the flight to the US is $1,000 and Brazil is 1,200, maybe you can get them to, contribute 1,000 and then you just pay the extra 200. In some cases, I've seen where they're very adamant where no, they will only fly you to your home country and that's it. Similarly, at the end of your assignment, in theory, they should be flying you back to your home country, but if you're going to, say, do another expat assignment, let's say you're going to Hong Kong, depending on price, you can probably get them to fly you to, your new destination, and as opposed to making you go all the way back to the US and then having to fly to Hong Kong from there in that example. In my case, I actually moved to Oman from the UK. And so my home destination was the UK. So once a year, they would fly me back to the UK. And then when I finished, I actually didn't go back to the UK. I retired in Finland. So I was able to agree with them that they would just fly me to Finland instead. One thing to note if you're thinking about working in the Middle East prior to retirement is that you will need a work visa. And it's very difficult to get a work visa after the age of 60. In some cases, you can get a work visa up to the age of 65, but it probably will cost the company a lot more money and they will have to jump through a lot more hoops. So I would say if you're thinking maybe you would want to do it, then I would say your mid-50s is a good time to make that move. If you've gone to the Middle East to work and you find that you really enjoy working and living there, you have to then think about what you want to do if you want to remain. Unlike a lot of Western countries where after living there for a while, you can go ahead and get naturalized or get permanent residency, that doesn't really happen so much in the Middle East. It's very difficult to get naturalized, and it's also very difficult to get permanent residency. In fact, traditionally, you could be born and raised in that country and then you have to leave when you retire. So for example, I've seen and heard of stories where, someone, say for example, is born in Oman and they've lived there until they are 60 and they have to retire because they can't get their visa extended. But they're not able to stay. In fact, they will have to move to their home country of, say, Pakistan or India, because that's where their parents are from and that's where they have citizenship. The one caveat to that is that now a lot of countries are allowing foreigners to get residency if they purchase property. In most cases, you can't just purchase any property that you want. They have special authorized zones where expats can buy property. And if you buy property, then with that purchase, you also get residency. So that would be the solution that you would use if you wanted to remain in the Middle East once you stopped working. So those are my thoughts on retiring after working in the Middle East. I hadn't planned to retire early, but I had gone to Oman to work and I realized that actually I had been relatively disciplined because I was saving up the extra money that I was making because the cost of living wasn't so high and because I wasn't paying tax. So with those savings, I was able to retire early and move to Finland. I think that's a great option for anyone who can be disciplined. Now, there are a lot of ways to spend your money. You can live in really fancy houses, you can drive really big expensive cars. There are always lots of restaurants, bars, place to go out and splash your cash. So if you're going there to live that kind of a lifestyle, then the suggestions I've given you probably won't help you. But if you think that you can live a frugal life and just rein in your spending, you can save a lot of money when you're living in the Middle East. So it's something I think everyone should think about. That's it for today's talk. Hope you enjoyed it and hope it gave you something to think about. Bye bye.